Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Over the past year, as we have shared this time together each weekday morning, we have talked about prayer often. I've said many things, but by far the most important thing I've said about prayer is that at its heart, prayer seeks not to get God to do your will, but instead to align your will with God's will. A second thing is that prayer arises out of relationship. So just as in any relationship, it's important to share the concerns and joys on your heart. And that's what prayer is made up of too. We are in a relationship with God. And so we share ourselves and feel closer to God as we do. Last week I ran across a listing of the top 10 prayers in the Bible. And it was divided neatly into 5 prayers from the Old Testament and 5 from the New Testament. And so I thought that might be an interesting thing for us to look at together. This week, we'll look at the top 5 prayers from the Old Testament. And next week, we'll dig into the top 5 prayers from the New Testament. The one we will explore today is Abraham's prayer for Sodom. And it's found in Genesis 18. The first thing to notice is that it's not a prayer as we typically think of prayer. Abraham doesn't kneel or bow down, and more than anything else, the whole thing comes across like a conversation between God and Abraham. And maybe before we even get into it, there's a pretty important thing to see. Prayer is intended as conversation. Far too often, the only one who speaks in our prayers is us. But a very important part of prayer is listening, leaving space and being still and quiet so that you are aware of God answering back. Maybe that's part of what the psalm means when it tells us to be still and know that God is God. Take time in your prayers to be still, to listen, to converse. Another thing to notice is that Sodom is not a place you'd expect Abraham to pray for. It was known as a wicked city, inhospitable in many ways. And when God tells Abraham that he plans to destroy it, Abraham begins to discuss it with God. Now, right there's another thing we should consider, even before we get into the story itself. Abraham prayed on behalf of other people. And in fact, not just other people, but other wicked people. And maybe that's a message to us that as we remember our loved ones before God in our own prayers, perhaps our prayers should also include those far different from us, and those most people never think to pray for. So God tells Abraham he will destroy the city, and Abraham speaks. Suppose, Abraham says, suppose there are 50 righteous people there. Will you destroy them along with everyone else? And God answers that if there are 50 righteous there, he won't destroy the city. And then comes the interesting part. Abraham says, suppose there are only 45 who are righteous. And it goes on from there with Abraham consistently lowering the number and God consistently promising not to destroy the city until it gets down to 10. But here's the thing. Abraham's prayer on behalf of Sodom doesn't focus on their sinfulness or even seeking for them to change. Rather, Abraham's prayer focuses on the character and nature of God. What his prayer really asks is, can a God of mercy and grace act this way? And of course, the answer is no. Abraham's prayer asks for God to be true to God's nature of love. And Abraham's prayer asks for God to do what God always does. to have mercy, to forgive. Perhaps our prayers would be better offered if they did that too. If they sought to let God be God. If they sought to focus on the love and mercy and grace of God. If they expressed compassion and care for the forgotten and the oppressed. In this prayer, Abraham got himself out of the way and sought an opportunity to experience God's mercy and grace. It's the best kind of prayer there is. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.